Hello, we studied Chapter 8, Promoting Academic Literacy Development in English, researched and written by Rebecca D. Freeman, Ph.D. This chapter focuses on research done on reading and writing workshop in one ELL classroom. In the introduction to this chapter, Freeman discusses the way that she initially chose the classroom teachers and classrooms in which she would conduct this research. Two key perspectives on literacy were highlighted in this introduction as the determining factors contributing to how she chose the host classrooms and teachers. Freeman focuses on two differing views of literacy, which she calls the traditional view or autonomous view versus the social view or societal view of literacy. The traditional view of literacy sees reading and writing as a set of skills that are independent of social context. And learning to read and write means the same thing for all individuals in all contexts. Teachers and policymakers with this view of literacy have advocated for more standardized curricula and assessment for early elementary with a focus on skills needed to decode and encode meaning in print. This philosophy has been criticized by researchers for its failure to understand the nature of academic language and of how students develop expertise in a range of literacies. Students under these type of programs tend to show gains in the early years and then fall farther and farther behind beginning in 4th grade. Teachers who subscribe to this view tend to view alternative literacies, languages, and dialects as a deficit the child needs to overcome. The social view of literacy sees that literacy is dependent on context. Teachers subscribing to this view believe that students can be literate in a variety of contexts and that literacies are used by different social groups at different times in different places for different purposes. The languages and literacies associated with the different academic disciplines vary, and so researchers and practitioners may focus on the languages of science or the genres associated with history, the literacies of math, and so on. These educators and policymakers reject the notion that non-standard varieties of the societal languages or languages other than the dominant one are deficits or problems. They instead use the multiple literacies and languages of their students as resources to promote second language acquisition. This social view of literacy was the criteria Freeman used to determine the teachers and classrooms where she would conduct her research, and also drove the development of the writing and reading program. Freeman became a student teacher and co-researcher with Ms. Rodriguez in her 5th grade classroom. The class was an ELL class in a public middle school in North Philadelphia. The school was predominantly Latino and also had a high population of African American students. 100% of the population was considered low income. The majority of students scored below, quote, basic level on the standardized tests. Ms. Rodriguez's class was 100% Puerto Rican. The school was divided into two parts: mainstreamed English classrooms and a bilingual program where Spanish speakers received instruction in Spanish. Ms. Rodriguez's class was comprised of students who were Spanish speakers in mainstream English classrooms. Her class was a RELA classroom, standing for Reading English Language Arts. The writing program was a traditional program with a narrow definition of writing. Writing consisted of copying from the board, responding to short teacher-directed prompts, and was not student-centered. The teacher did use ALEM, Adaptive Learning Environmental Model, a system of classroom management designed to provide for individualized small group and whole group instruction. The program requires efficient classroom management and clear scaffolded learning targets. Ms. Rodriguez sought help to develop her writing program to better meet the needs of her students. The program development represented a shift from the traditional view of literacy to a program that better represented the teacher's social view of literacy. It incorporated a writing assignment inspired by an oral history project called Taller Puertorriqueño. The writing program developed was based on required writing and literacy standards and was also designed to meet the needs of the students' families and their community. Freeman began by assessing the students and curricula based on 3 questions. The first question was, what do our students need to know and be able to do in order to write books about their family's histories? Their findings were how they needed to know how to collect data and write up findings, how to interview people about their migration histories and about how they use spoken and written Spanish and English in their lives. They needed to know how to listen and record stories that people tell them, and how to organize data collected into a coherent piece of academic writing. The second question was, what kind of expertise did our students already have that we could build on? All the students were Puerto Rican, with families migrating to Philadelphia from the island. All the families used Spanish and English. And the teachers expected that topics of migration and bilingualism would be important to these students and to their families. The third question was, what evidence could we find to demonstrate students' performance and development relative to the objectives and goals? They used a variety of performance-based assessments. Created portfolios that provided evidence of the process as well as the product of the Readers and Writers Workshop, used portfolios when conferring with students about their work, and shared portfolios with parents and other teachers. The writing unit was created to include student interviews with their friends. However, students were able to write and copy answers to informational questions, but were reluctant to ask each other open-ended interview questions. Students did not generate much writing about each other, and so teachers were required to adjust instruction. They created a family history book. They used ELA standards. They created an oral retelling of a friend's story. Students did daily journal entries. And the findings, and in order for the students to develop research and writing expertise, teachers decided to divide the process into scaffolding, students working together, creating a book, pair share, interviewing one another, brainstorming questions, writing their drafts, and sharing their drafts. They found that students were able to write and address informational questions, but were not able to ask open-ended questions or to generate much writing about one another. Therefore, the teachers adjusted instruction to provide more read-alouds of mentor texts reflecting the type of writing required in the project. This type of adjustment based on student understanding and background knowledge is difficult to implement in a standardized program, which is one of the reasons that the traditional view of literacy does not benefit ELLs as much. After adjusting for student needs, the teachers immersed students in authentic mentor texts to scaffold their understanding of how to write about other people. They also used vocabulary activities and retelling activities to scaffold student oral and written growth. In comparison with the original stale writing environment, students became a much more lively and engaged group of writers. Freeman found that after implementation of this oral history project, students were more engaged and were writing longer texts. The rotation system helped to foster this growth. Obviously, one semester was not enough to close the learning gap, but the growth students made under this new program confirmed that they were headed in the right direction. The benefits of using Spanish cannot be overlooked. A key component of this approach was that Spanish was viewed and utilized as an asset. Spanish was used to engage and communicate with parents. However, it is important to remember that students may not be able to do their own translations, particularly when they are still gaining confidence in English. This worked because it was a standard-based project that also connected to the students' families and their community. This program could be adopted to be used in a variety of language programs, not just in the context of an English classroom. Teachers should scaffold to build a bridge between students L1 and L2. They can also use a unit like this one to connect between subjects and genres of writing. Finally, it is important to provide students with the opportunity to analyze the context in which certain linguistic practices are appropriate, and to compare the ways languages are used differently in different contexts. From a programmatic perspective, it is essential that ELL teachers do not work in isolation and that schools provide well-articulated language policies and programs to support teachers and their ELL students.